Hi, welcome to part 2 of Career Conversations. A conversation coming from questions that you asked around careers. I'm a career person, so I thought we put them together and chat. I'm asking a lot of questions, hopefully probing, hopefully will allow you to discover your own answers to whatever challenges you may have at the moment, at least career-wise. In part 1, I talked about getting started. That was mainly targeted at those who've never worked before, those who are thinking about what careers to pursue, at least in my opinion, some things that need to be thought about. Part 2, we talk about career challenges. Not all of them, a few, especially around progress and stagnation. It's a question that I've been asked. What do I do if I feel that my career is not going anywhere? What should I be thinking about if I've been in the same role for years and there appears no opportunity to move forward? What do I do? A bit later, I'll touch on how you recover from significant issues, challenges when things don't go well. But first, stagnation. So a situation where you've been in the same role for years, you haven't moved, perhaps your reward hasn't changed, you appear to be going nowhere. What do you do? What do you think about? When I thought about this question, I sort of put it into a few categories, at least in terms of how we should think about our response. First is an introspection. Is it me who has an issue? Is my lack of progress potentially because of something about me? Now, I don't mean this in a derogatory or a negative way, but what I'm talking about is doing an honest self-assessment about where you are. Do you have the requisite skills, qualifications to move to the next level? It could be that you have skills, you're trained, vastly experienced, but perhaps they're not adequate for the next level. Is there something that you can do there? Next, also looking at yourself. Is your performance up to standard? It's possible that there could be a challenge with performance. I'm not sure whether all of us are able to acknowledge that our performance needs improvement, but let's assume that there's nothing with the organization, that perhaps there is something that we could do better. Are we clear about what that is, and do we have a plan to remediate it? The other thing that I think is important as this introspection is done is, what is your ambition? And is your ambition known? It's one thing to aspire for greater responsibilities, for progress, greater reward. Has that been made known to those who need to be in the know? Now, I don't take it for granted that perhaps you could have done all these things and the situation still doesn't change, but we'll come to that in a bit when we look at, is it the organization? In part 1 of this conversation, we're looking about, is it me? So I've told you about your qualifications, potentially performance, and the clarity of your ambitions. The other thing that I think we also need to think about, and this one sort of straddles in between the individual and the organization, is the clarity of goals and objectives. How clearly defined are those? How measurable are the KPIs? Is it easy for good performance to be pointed at, to be identified, to be acknowledged? Is the measurement basis or criteria for performance, for promotion, for reward changes clearly defined? Now, part of that is the responsibility of the individual. Part of it is the responsibility of the organization. So there's a bit of an intersection set here. But in as far as you as an individual is concerned, how well have you done in terms of defining your objectives and getting clarity if currently there is ambiguity. That is something that is within our control, irrespective of which organization we're in. What's expected of me? What does good, exceptional performance look like? For me to be considered a high performer, what must I do? I'm not sure how many organizations would respond to that in the negative. There probably are some, but in most organizations, you'll probably get a reasonable response. If your targets are X, for you to be considered a high performer, you must achieve Y. Like I said, perhaps a bit controversial, maybe a bit idealistic, but that is some thoughts around factors that are within the control of me as an individual. The next part, if I'm experiencing stagnation and the lack of progress, is to look at the organization. So let's assume that what I've discussed previously is taken care of. You're sufficiently ambitious, your goals are defined, you have the right qualifications, but you're still not progressing. Then is there something with the organization, all right? Different organizations have different cultures, but let's put culture aside to start with. So first, what is the structure like? In organizations like mine, we talk about business cases. How many opportunities are there for an individual to progress? If you work in finance or procurement and there's only one role above you, then perhaps irrespective of what you've done, irrespective of what you've achieved or how you've performed, the organizational structure just doesn't allow it. It won't accommodate an additional person at a higher level. That's one possibility. The other possibility I've touched on previously in our intersection set. The culture, there's ambiguity, there's some things that are within your control, other things that are outside your control. And this is where you start to make an honest assessment about whether you can make an impactful change. You then start to look at within the organization, are there opportunities to progress? Perhaps not in my department, but another department. Especially if you're a good performer, you've been there a number of years, you've understood the business, you may not have the qualifications or requisite skills for a particular area, but given how you've demonstrated your attitude, your ability to learn, your ability to solve problems, the initiative that you apply, your leadership skills which you possess, there's opportunity to grow elsewhere. Do those opportunities exist? Can you pursue them? If you make an assessment and it seems, irrespective of what you've done, that the organization is unlikely to accommodate you, then is your growth path outside the organization? Something to think about. So those are some thoughts about stagnation and overcoming that. I suspect I'll get quite a few comments around this, but let's have a conversation and see how we go. The next bit is dealing with failure. How do you pick yourself up when you've had career failures? You went for an opportunity, there were two of you who were being considered, you didn't make it. Perhaps you even got fired. The first is to understand what actually happened. Was it something with you? Was the other candidate better? What did you do wrong which ended up catastrophically? What do you learn? And how do you pick yourself up from that? This obviously excludes circumstances where you were unfairly treated clearly. That's a conversation for an entirely different day, and maybe we'll have it. But what do you do? If that's an organization that you want to continue to be with, then I believe there's opportunity for you to have conversations about what you need to do better. This is assuming you've missed an opportunity, or perhaps you didn't do something particularly well. What did I do? What can I do better? The ideal is to acknowledge what you yourself could have done better. I think that makes the feedback process a lot easier and more effective if it's honest and open. This again is assuming you can have those sorts of conversations. So those are a few thoughts about dealing with stagnation and dealing with failure. Fairly broad conversation that can still be had over and above what we've discussed. But I think that sort of addresses the questions that you sent in. So thank you very much, and we look forward to part 3.